Hi, good morning. My name is Lindsay Linzer. I am the Managing Director of Community Investments at the Miami Foundation. I'm here today with Nikki Zarkin of Radical Partners, and the purpose of today's webinar is to review the reporting requirements of the Miami-Dade Nonprofit Support Grant Program. Today's webinar will be recorded, so if you have colleagues that were unable to attend, the recording as well as the slides will be available on our website starting tomorrow. During the webinar, please use the Q&A function of Zoom to submit your questions. And then at the end of today's presentation, we'll go ahead and stay on to make sure we answer every single one of your questions. Before we dive in, here is a reminder of the various resources available to you as you work to complete your grant reports. On the Miami Foundation website, you'll find the complete report guidelines, and included in the report guidelines are all of the final report questions that we ask, as well as guidance on how to answer those questions, and some frequently asked questions that we've already been getting from the folks who are already submitting their reports. As you work on your report and need help, the best way to get a quick answer is to send an email to support@miamifoundation.org. We have a team at the Miami Foundation ready to quickly respond to your questions. And finally, we'll be using Submittable to submit reports to the foundation. Visit Miami-Dade nonprofit support grants.submittable.com to submit your report. You're going to need to be able to log in to the account that you submitted your application using. I'm going to say it again. You need to log into Submittable using the same account that you submitted your application using. And from there, there's guidance within the report guidelines on how you can go about submitting your final report. We'll go into some more detail later in the presentation. Before we dive into the final report, though, I just want to take a minute and remind everyone about the source of these grant funds. These grants were made possible from federal coronavirus relief funds, also known as CARES Act funds. The federal government allocated to Miami-Dade County, which dedicated then a portion of the millions received to support small nonprofits in Miami-Dade County that were impacted by COVID-19. We launched the Miami-Dade Nonprofit Support Grant Program in partnership with the Department of Public Housing and Community Development. The funds were designated to support employee payroll, business interruption costs, and other expenses related to COVID-19. So with limited time to actually get these dollars out into the community and into the hands of nonprofits, we really did our best to try and create a simple process for nonprofits to apply and receive the funds. We utilized our community partners to try and spread the word about the program and ensure that every single eligible nonprofit knew about this opportunity. In just under a month, in the month of September, we received 608 applications asking for a total of $13.4 million in support. The average grant request was $26,000. The Miami Foundation team then worked furiously to quickly and thoroughly review the applications and approve payments. We wanted to get the money in your hands as soon as possible. But we quickly realized that the $10 million that had been allocated to this program was not going to be sufficient to actually ensure that every single nonprofit that submitted a valid application would receive the funds they deserved. We worked tirelessly with the Board of County Commissioners at the end of the year to request additional funds to support this program, and we're thrilled to say that we got the requested support. By the end of the program, we awarded 423 grants totaling $11.3 million, and the average grant award was just over $26,000. So that means that every organization that applied to the program and had a valid application and a valid ask received the funds that they asked for. And this hopefully made the difference for many organizations that were faced with really tough decisions about paying staff and covering overhead expenses. And the grantees represented everyone across the county. We have grantees from every single municipality and across every commission district. And while the grantees were small, all of them had 25 or fewer employees, they represented a diverse range of sectors and populations. We know from the grantee feedback that the program provided a critical lifeline for nonprofits at the end of last year. And now here comes the fun part. So now that you've all received your grant money, in the final days of 2020, we released the final dollars. Now is the time to actually work on submitting reports back to the Miami Foundation. In order to meet the compliance requirements that come down from the federal government through Miami-Dade County to the Miami Foundation, we need to gather a final report from every single grantee to verify that the federal dollars were used appropriately. As stipulated in the grant agreement that was included as part of your grant application, all grantees must submit a final report by February 12th, 2021 to substantiate the use of grant funds. There will be no exceptions to this rule. Generally, the Miami Foundation tries to be flexible and allow exceptions to grant reporting deadlines, but in this case, because of the source of the funds being federal dollars and rules by when we have to actually report as a Miami Foundation back to Miami-Dade County up to the federal government, we are going to need every single report in by February 12th, 2021. So we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about how to actually go about submitting your report and what it is we're asking for in your report. The first thing you're going to want to do is review the report template. Again, that can be found on our website at the link you can see on your screen, miamifoundation.org/COVID-19 relief grants. While you're there, you should also reread the program guidelines to familiarize yourself with the allowable use of grant funds. Then, after you've reviewed that, you're going to want to go ahead and log into Submittable at Miami-Dade nonprofitsupportgrants.submittable.com. Again, I'm going to say it, I said it at the beginning, but you're going to need to log in to the same Submittable account that you used to submit the grant application. Once you're actually logged into Submittable, the final report is linked as a new form that is attached to your original grant application. So when you're in Submittable, you can review what it is that you submitted to the Miami Foundation as part of your grant application, and then you'll see another form that's attached to it that's looking for you to complete the final report. Within the final report guidelines, there are really detailed instructions on how and where you can visually see this final report in Submittable. But as you're doing this, if you need any help at all, the quickest way for you to get help and get the answers you need are to send an email to support@miamifoundation.org. The report should hopefully be relatively easy for most of you to complete and hopefully will not take more than an hour of your time at most. There are 4 sections of the report. We want to understand the use of the grant. We'll collect a financial report to see how funds were used. There'll be space for you to upload attachments to show as backup detail for how those funds were used. And there will then be a certification. I'm going to walk through each of these sections in detail on the subsequent slides. Use of the grant. So in this first section of the report, we're going to ask you some questions about how the funds were ultimately used. And if they were used for a purpose that differs from what you originally proposed in your application, we want to know about it. As long as they were used for one of the allowable purposes under the grant program, again, review the program guidelines so that you remind yourself what those allowable purposes are. It's okay if you use the funds in a different way than how you said you were going to use them. So I'm going to give you an example. If your organization proposed to use the funds to purchase PP&E, but then you didn't get the funds till too late and you need to actually make that PP&E purchase, that is totally fine. But since the funds have to be used by December 30th, again, all funds had to have been expensed and used by December 30th, you have to choose one of the other allowable categories of expenses. So instead of using it for PP&E, you may say that you were using the funds to cover your staff and overhead expenses for the months of October through December. You don't have to ask us for approval in advance. You just submit that information as part of your final report. And again, that is totally acceptable as long as it's for an allowable purpose underneath the program guidelines. We just need to really be detailed in your explanation in the report, provide that backup documentation of how you use those funds, and then if we have any questions or we think that you're submitting it for a use that wasn't allowable, we'll follow up with you after you submit your report. All right, the next section is the financial report. This is an Excel table that's built directly into Submittable. The good news is if your organization only received funds for reimbursement, meaning we gave you dollars to reimburse you for expenses that you had from March 1st until August 31st, you do not need to complete this financial report. I'm going to say it again. If we only gave you money for reimbursements, and those were for expenses for reimbursements from March 1st to August 31st, you do not need to complete this financial report. The reason why is, as part of your application, you already submitted all of the backup documentation for those reimbursements that we approved. We don't need you to resubmit this information again. But if you received funds for what we categorized as future projected expenses, that was for the dates of September 1st through December 30th, you must complete the financial report. This is where you are going to tell us exactly how you used the funds that you received. You will include in the table how you expected to use the funds and then how you actually use the funds. Again, I'm going to say that variances are allowable. They just need to be explained and then backed up with documentation. After you've completed that financial report table, you'll then need to upload the backup documentation that shows evidence of the expenses and that they were paid. So again, if you only received funds from the program for reimbursements, you do not need to complete this section. You already submitted all of the required attachments as part of your application. But if you received any money for future projected expenses, even if it was only $100 for future projected expenses, we are going to need the backup documentation to show how the proof of payment for those expenses. Within the reporting guidelines, there's lots of detail on like what that looks like. And here are some examples. This is the type of documentation we're going to be looking for. Dated invoices or receipts, a copy of maybe a rent or mortgage agreement or contract. If you're looking to pay employees for their time, a copy of their timesheets or your payroll ACH, a copy of your contracts with employees. If you're looking for, that you use the money towards your bills, we need a copy of the bill and then showing evidence that you actually paid that bill. So it might be a screenshot of your bank account. We might need email confirmation saying you actually received specific things you were buying, and then evidence that you paid for those goods. A copy of a canceled check if you paid via check. Credit card transactions or bank statements or wire transaction. This list is not exhaustive, and we don't need everything on this list to validate every single payment, but we need you to understand that we need full, complete backup documentation for every single expense for the money that you received. So I'm going to give you an example. So if you use the funds to support employee costs, please include copies of your payroll documentation and then also show evidence that they were paid. If you were using, on the other hand, if you were using the funds to support your rental costs, please include a copy of your rental agreement and then evidence of the payment. Maybe it's a copy of the check, maybe it's a copy from the bank statement showing that the money left your account for the time period covered. And then the final section of the report is the certification. We're looking for you to then confirm for us that everything that you submitted as part of the report is true and accurate, and that the funds were only used for the 3 pre-approved purposes: business interruption costs, mitigation expenses for reopening, or program transition support related to COVID-19. You will also confirm that the funds were not used to cover expenses that were already covered by government programs. If at any point it is uncovered that the funds were used for an alternate purpose or in violation of the grant agreement and program guidelines, the Miami Foundation reserves the right to request the return of grant funds. Trust me when I say we do not want to do that. So please make sure that when you're completing this report, you're verifying and showing documentation showing that the funds were used for approved purposes under the program. Before we jump into questions from the audience, I wanted to review a few of the frequently asked questions that we're expecting from nonprofits. The first question, can you submit the report early? Yes, please do. We have 423 reports to review in a very short amount of time. Early submissions are greatly appreciated, especially for those organizations who only received funding for reimbursements, meaning you have no financial report to complete or documentation to upload. You should be able to complete this report in a matter of minutes and get it submitted. What happens to unspent funds? So as I mentioned before, funds that were not spent for the approved purposes of the program must be returned to the Miami Foundation. We sincerely hope this does not happen. We know that every organization that received funds has people costs, has overcosts. These are allowable expenses under the program. So please use the funds for that purpose when possible. The next question we get is, are future expenses changed? What should we do? As I mentioned earlier, In the financial report, there will be a space for you to say, here's how I expected to use the funds, here's how I actually used them. As long as they were used for expenses that are allowable under the grant program and backup documentation is included, there is no issue. You do not need to ask our permission in advance. Just include it as part of your report. And for those of you who are questioning, well, I got some money for reimbursements and I also got some money for projected expenses. For the financial report and the documentation, we only need the money related to future projected expenses. Everything related to reimbursements was already covered as part of your application. We've got the backup documentation, we have that detail. The next question is, we forgot our submittable password. What do we do? So that is not when you should come to the Miami Foundation. We actually can't help you reset that password. You actually have to go directly to Submittable if you need to reset your submittable password. You can do that by emailing support@submittable.com for any submittable related issues. Another question is, the funds came so late in the year. What if we didn't spend them by December 30th? So again, December 30th was the last possible date which the funds had to be used. Hopefully, you can actually apply them to staff, contractor, or overhead costs for the period of time between March 1st and December 30th. We do not want them returned to foundation. But if you weren't able to apply them for one of those categories of funds, anything under the program guidelines that we said was allowable, then my staff will work with you to make sure that we get those funds returned as soon as possible. What happens if we submit our report late? You can't submit it late. We need all of the reports by February 12th, no exceptions. If the report is not submitted, you risk the foundation requesting the return of grant funds. Again, we don't want any funds returned. We know every organization that received funds needs the funds, so please submit your report on time. As a reminder, here are all of the resources that you need to help you complete your final report. We're now going to open it up and I have Nikki join us on the screen to help us go through some of the questions that I've seen coming in through the Q&A box. It's possible I answered some of them as we were talking, but we'll go ahead and repeat them just to make sure for anybody who may have joined late that you have the answers that you need. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Lindsay. Good morning. Thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. Yeah, I think a couple of people were a little premature, but we can give them all a nice refresher. So the first question that came in was, I printed this out and I did it on a PDF. Do I have to do it through Submittable?
Yes, all of the reports need to be submitted online through Submittable through the platform. We need to have your application linked to your final report. Submittable is also where once we've gone ahead and taken the time to review the report, we'll send you a notification once we reviewed it, letting you know that the report is approved and there's no outstanding requirements from the Miami Foundation related to this grant.
Wonderful. Thank you. There are two questions about documentation and evidence of expenses. So particularly one for payroll, which is if I pay my staff through, I'm sorry if everyone can hear my dog barking downstairs. I don't know if it's just me. If I pay my employees via check and I don't pay them through payroll software, like what evidence is needed for that? And then also, if I purchase things online, is the receipt okay? Or do I need to show a bank statement as well that shows it coming out of my bank account?
Yep. So as it relates to paying employees via check, we would need the canceled checks to show that those people were paid. If you have a contract with those employees or evidence that they are employees related to your organization that you were paying, please include that as well. And related to making online purchases, a screenshot or receipt showing that the purchase was made is going to be sufficient. We don't need the bank statement also showing the purchase came out of your account, as long as it's actually not just a screenshot that says you were planning to buy something in an Amazon cart, but actually evidence that payment was made to Amazon for the item you were planning to purchase. That will be sufficient backup.
Some folks are asking if they applied and received both types of funding, so reimbursements and future expenses. Do they still have to fill out the financial report, and which ones do they fill out? Do they fill out both or just the future expenses?
It's a great question. And so, yes, if you received both the reimbursements as well as projected future expenses, you do need to submit a report. Everyone needs to submit a report, but you only need to, for that financial report table, that Excel table, we're only looking for numbers related to the future expenses. Similarly, we're also only looking for documentation related to projected future expenses. For anybody who received money for a reimbursement, we already gathered that information as part of your application. So we're not needing you to submit that again. That has already been reviewed and verified as part of your application process.
Wonderful. Quite a few folks are asking about if things were ordered prior to the December 30th deadline, but the check didn't clear or the money didn't come out of the bank account until afterwards. Is that still an eligible expense?
Yes, so we would need, ideally, we would need the proof that shows it was ordered, say on December 29th, and that would be evidence enough. So even if the check wasn't cashed or received until January 5th, as long as we'd need to show both documents, but the evidence that it was actually ordered within the allowable window of time between March 1st and December 30th will be sufficient for it to be allowable under this program.
Great. And then just to head back 1 second to the past question, there's a clarification. If you applied for a mix of future expenses and reimbursements, just to clarify, you do not have to submit the reimbursement evidence, just the future expense evidence.
Exactly. If you received money for reimbursements, we do not need any more evidence. We already validated all of your evidence when you submitted your application. And so at some point, when we sent out the award emails related to your application and to this grant, you got an email from the Miami Foundation, from me specifically, that said, here's how much you received for reimbursements, here's how much you received for future projected expenses. And so that number, how much you received for future projected expenses, that's what you're completing in that financial report Excel table, and that's what you're uploading backup documentation.
Great. Several people. Okay, so one person is asking, in the government funds mentioned in the certification portion.
If at any point, like, oh, I think we lost you for a second, Nikki. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I'm back. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Hear you fine.
Great. One person is asking, in the government funding in the certification section, does that include Miami-Dade County grant funds?
Yes. So when we're saying that you have to certify that you did not use the funds, for something else that's already been covered by government grant funds. So if you already received a grant from a government entity to cover your rent for the period of September and October, you cannot apply Miami-Dade Nonprofit Support Grant funds for those same 2 months. You can apply them for November and December, but you can't apply them for September and October because you already received funding for that period of time.
Great. I'm scanning through here. There are quite a few repeat ones, so I'm hopeful that people got their questions answered beforehand. Someone is asking, could you clarify the cutoff date between reimbursements versus projected expenses? Though I think folks should have been aware of that when they were applying.
Yes. So when you were applying, we said that it was considered a reimbursement if it was from March 1st through August 31st. That was considered a reimbursement. Future projected expenses was considered September 1st through December 30th. At this point, as part of your final report, if you received money, but then you were no longer able to use it for what you were expecting to use it for, and you're looking to cover your people costs or your overhead costs for, say, April, that is allowable. It was still a future projected expense because as part of your application, you didn't submit that for a reimbursement. Do you know what I mean? But now you're looking for us to cover that expense. That is acceptable. It just needs to be explained as part of your report. So again, if it deviates at all from what you submitted in your application, it just needs to be explained, and there's plenty of space to do that within the final report.
Great. I think One of the final questions that is a good wrap up is there going to be ample support for folks who need to help completing their application as they work through it?
So yes, we will give you support, as we did, as hopefully many of you saw during the grant application phase, that once you submit your report, if there isn't the documentation that we need, or if we have a question, we'll reach out to you. We're not just going to decline your report. We want to work with you to make sure that we can actually get the documentation needed so that you can submit a successful report and that we can ultimately click approve. The best way to get support is going to be by going first to the support inbox, support@miamifoundation.org. I have a team of people at the Miami Foundation who are all managing that inbox, who will get in touch with you, and as needed, walk you through the report and help you complete it. I do request, given that there are 423 grantees, that you, before you just send an email asking questions, that you thoroughly review the information that's available on our website. We have the reporting guidelines, we have the program guidelines. Everything is there for you, so please take the time to thoroughly review everything before emailing over any questions.
Wonderful. And then I think just a final, some folks are asking, where can I find it? What, can you just reiterate where they find the application, when it's due, all those final details?
Yeah, and I see a few other things also came into the chat, so I'll go ahead and answer those as well. So everything, the homepage on our website, miamifoundation.org/COVID, the number 19, relief grants, everything is there. So that's where you can go ahead and re-download the program guidelines. That's where you can go ahead and download the link to the reporting guidelines. On that site, on that page, we'll also have the link to Submittable, where you're going to go ahead and submit your report. Miami-Dade nonprofit support grants.submittable.com. We'll include there the email for how you're going to go ahead and contact us. That's where the link to this recording will also live, as well as these slides will also be shared on our webpage there. I'm seeing in the chat there was a question about paying individuals, non-employees as 1099. Yes, contractors, 1099 employees, that is all under the staff category. That is an allowable expense under the program. And I see another question that. Sorry. Yep, go ahead, Nikki.
I was seeing another question come in also. Is there an opportunity to apply for more funding?
So at this point, we don't have any further agreements with the county to release additional dollars into the community. I know additional federal dollars are going to be flowing into Miami-Dade County. And so if at any point that becomes available for nonprofits and is managed through the Miami Foundation, we will make sure that you guys are among the first to know about that. But at this point, there are no additional programs that we are managing related to nonprofits receiving any federal CARES Act dollars.
Okay.
I see a question here about, ensuring, will there be support to ensure the documentation needed is submitted? So when you go ahead and submit your report, you won't receive any sort of confirmation or anything. But once we've had a chance to review the report, you will then receive a confirmation from us that the report has been received and approved, or you'll receive an email from us letting us know, nope, we need some additional information. Please go ahead and submit it within probably 48 hours is what we'll ask for. And again, there's going to be, I know some organizations, some individuals are going to have unique questions related to just their application, what they're submitting. Those are really best handled offline. We're not going to address any of those questions today on the webinar. So if there's a situation that's really specific to your organization, please feel free to just send us an email at support@miamifoundation.org. And so that we can go ahead and follow up with you and just kind of understand your situation. But again, there are not going to be situations where we say that your report can be submitted late, or that there's an extension on when you could use the funds. All of the funds had to have been expensed, all incurred by December 30th, and really had to be doing the window March 1st to December 30th. And I love this. I'm seeing in the chat some shout outs for some people on the Miami Foundation team who helped with applications. We're here to help you. We really wanted to see our nonprofits be successful in this program, which is why, as hopefully you saw during the application phase, we tried to get on the phone with you and email with you and help you submit some successful applications. We petitioned the county commission to try and get more funds to make sure, again, every single nonprofit who requested funds that deserved them and had a valid application got the funds that they needed. Again, please remember, report by February 12th. Submit your questions to support@miamifoundation.org. I know I've been the one that you've been receiving a lot of the emails from, but again, it's best to send your emails to support@miamifoundation.org because there's a team of 4 people checking that inbox. Whereas if I get the email, I'm just forwarding it to the support inbox. You might as well send it to the support inbox first, and someone on my team will jump right on and get you the help you needed to submit your report successfully. We are really just so thankful to have you as our partners. We're excited that this program was so successful. We want all of you to keep the dollars, so please make sure you report, show us how you use the funds. We don't want to take any of them back. So thank you so much. We appreciate your partnership and the important work that you're doing in our community, and we look forward to hearing from you and reading your reports. Take care and have a great afternoon. Check out our website starting tomorrow for a copy of these slides. Thanks and have a great day. Bye.